I have seen some very ugly things that I wish I had never seen from religious leaders who have treated those single as if they had a disease or as if there was something wrong with them, all because they were not married. They are often overlooked and treated as if they are invisible. They are tolerated, not loved.
Well, there's something wrong with you because you're not married. When she says, son, when you get married, it's like, well, there's something wrong with you. You don't have a girlfriend and you're not married, so there's something really wrong with you. And, that was a very clear message that came through.
Does the church treat singles poorly? Is there even a place for singles in the modern church? Today we discuss the truth about how the church treats single Christians. All right, well, hello and welcome to the Verity Podcast, Episode 7. Today, we got everybody here with us, all four of us, and we're dealing with a pretty heavy topic for us, one that is very personal for all of us, and probably one that's going to take a little bit of time to get through because we got quite a bit to say about it. So this will probably be a multi-part series. So this will be part 1 of this, but we want to talk about the way the church treats single people.
Okay, so really this starts with, I want to start with the looking at some statistics from the Barna Group. I don't know if our listeners are familiar with the Barna Group, but they do a lot of good research on, in particular with issues that are important and matter for Christians and faith and family. And one of their more recent surveys where we pulled some data from the work that they had done, and they were this was on divorce, and so we're looking at the divorce and the divorce rate, and the divorce rate for all Americans, according to Barna's research, is 41%. Amongst practicing Christians, it's 37%. Now, 41% and 37% statistically is not a big difference. I mean, those are pretty close. The other thing that's pretty alarming to me is that the non-practicing Christians, the divorce rate amongst non-practicing Christians is actually 44%, which is 3% higher than the non-Christian rate of divorce. And, I know that this is a topic that has garnered a lot of attention within church leaders and whatnot, and probably a lot of we need more marriage seminars, or we need more classes, or we need to emphasize marriage more from the pulpit. And I'm wondering, in some cases, the causality for this. And there are I'm going to say right up front, there's multiple reasons and multiple causes for the divorce. There's not a one. They're all this is the problem, or there's multiple reasons why this happens. And everybody is talking, looking, whatever, at most of the other reasons. But there's something that I think we want to talk about that is, something that nobody's talking about. And just consider and posit, something that we need to, food for thought, that we need to just consider. And in particular, as Timothy mentioned, this is really my entire life. And I think most of us have seen this. Most of you may have seen it. I don't know. But there is an intense societal pressure, and in particular within the church culture, an enormous pressure to get married. And whether it's said or not, it's said in so many nonverbal ways, and so many communicated in so many different ways that, in order for you to be accepted, in order for you to be wanted, and for you need to be married. And that pressure, I think, in many cases has led to some really bad decisions that end up in divorce. And that's what we want to kind of talk about today. And we want to share some stories. We want to talk about some things that we think that, have happened. And I think Geraldine wanted to, we're going to let her go first, if that's okay.
Okay. Well, I have written, actually wrote a devotional about this subject, and I was going to read part of it. And, but first off, I was going to say the first, I guess, growing up in going to church, every time the door was open, I was there. From the time I was born, And I remember when I got to be, 12, 13, 14, whenever I would come in, it was always one of the, the elders or one of the ministers. But definitely it was, as I would come in the church, they would greet you. And they would always ask me, not how are you doing or what you've been up to. It was always, who's your boyfriend? What's your boyfriend's name? And I remember I was like, didn't really know what to say because I didn't have a boyfriend or wasn't, And then I would always feel weird. So from a very young age, I got in my head, okay, in order to be accepted here, you got to have a boyfriend. You got to have, and I just always felt weird about that. And that continued with me, even though whether I had a boyfriend or not, I always felt like I was being judged that way every time I went to church. And this definitely changed after I went to college and had that experience. But I'll just go ahead and read this devotional. I am married. I absolutely love being married. I love every little thing about it. Yet everyone who is married was once single. I was once single, and at the time I loved being single too. Yet I have witnessed many ways the singles are viewed and treated specifically in the church, from when I was single and after I was married, and it is not good. While applying to a Christian college many years ago, I wrote an essay when applying for a scholarship, which in the end I did not receive. Later, after attending the college for nearly a semester, the professor commented and bragged on my essay during one of her lectures. After class, I asked her if my essay had been that good. If it was that good, why was I not awarded the scholarship? She quickly turned red-faced and quietly whispered to me that it was given to another girl whose essay was not nearly as good as mine. I asked her then again, why? She told me very quickly that they felt that she needed the scholarship more and that it would be more beneficial to her since she was married, and that I was being a single woman. Well, and she never really finished her sentence, but it was very clear to me that I wasn't married. You're still living at home with your parents. She needs the money, or she needs it more than you, but the way that she blushed and she got very embarrassed with me, it was very, very clear to me that, oh, you're not married. So why would we give it to you? We need to give it to this other girl. And the other girl was actually a really good friend of mine. But I felt very, I can't think of the right word right now, but it made me feel awful.
Judged, maybe, or
Yeah.
no.
And because I was like, I did a lot of hard work on that essay in my writing, and that was very important to me. And I felt like I was being punished by the school because they loved I couldn't believe, because she was bragging on it in her lecture. And so that really hurt a lot, and that's a bad memory that I have. I have seen many good young single men being passed aside for preacher and minister positions simply because they were not married. There are some who are not allowed to teach because they are single. Those who are married get preferential treatment. I have seen some very ugly things that I wish I had never seen from religious leaders who have treated those single as if they had a disease like the plague, or as if there was something wrong with them, all because they were not married. They are often overlooked and treated as if they are invisible, with couples getting greeted, and one turns away when a lone one enters their place of worship. They are tolerated, not loved. Many churches, they do not even have a class for them, as they have a college class, and then they skip over them and go straight to the young marrieds class. I think the idea is after college you leave and don't come back until after you're married. I feel this huge emphasis upon being married equals being accepted. Those who are married are widely accepted without a thought, yet those who are single, who have never been married, are not accepted and treated to feel like outsiders, which is why so many of them no longer attend church services. I feel that to be accepted, you must be married. I see how our young ones view this and feel it puts an extreme strain upon them to hurry and get married. Otherwise, they will never be truly accepted. This is so damaging and dangerous as I see younger and younger Christians rushing into marriage with one they should have never married, or just settling for someone they don't love because they have to be married. This leads to many ending up being so very young and divorced. I feel that the pull upon us, upon these young adults to get married quickly is very wrong and is not in Jesus' plan for any of us.
So what I was hearing there is that there was an emphasis on acceptance and, approval. And I wonder, when churches look at the divorce rate, when they look at this and they say, well, we need to invest more in our young marrieds. We need to invest more in preaching about marriage. We need to emphasize marriage. And when they do that more, it kind of, again, tells people who are not married, hey, you don't matter as much because we're going to invest more money here. We're going to invest more time and energy over here because we want to try to improve marriages. And maybe they have good intentions. I'm not going to say that they don't. Okay, I'm not going to judge that. But the fact that when you emphasize what you emphasize speaks to people who are not part of that class that you don't matter as much. And it's a message that can definitely come through.
I was just going to say that it is a human need, as being a human, to be loved and being accepted from very young age. We all need to be loved and accepted. And as you get older, the acceptance for me, I would look more for at church. That's what was more important, because I could care less about at school if you were accepted or popular or whatever. But at church, it was a whole different, it was more of a need, wanting to be accepted at church by the church people. That was seriously lacking for me.
And you wonder sometimes, I know for you it's probably not the case, but I wonder too, a lot of the unchurched and a lot of people who have, there's a lot of headlines about a lot of prominent people who have left the church who are saying they're no longer Christians. There's a mass exodus that has been happening the last few years, and you wonder sometimes too how many of those folks, if you feel like the people at church, and these are God's people that won't accept you, then you wonder sometimes if some of these people say, well, God's a jerk and he doesn't love me and he doesn't accept me either. If these people are jerks, then because they're his people, well, he must be a jerk too. It's not a stretch for folks to go there. I mean, if you don't really know him, you don't understand that he's really not like those folks at all. He's completely different, and they're the ones that actually have the problem, not him and not you. It's actually them. But again, it's a problem, and I think it is definitely contributing to the exodus that you've seen from churches, and people are just saying, I love God. There's a lot of people out there say I love God, I just don't like church people, and I'm like, and a lot of people scoff at that, but I'm like, you know what? If you scoff at that, then you're not really paying attention to what's happening, because there's a lot of really mean things that have been done and said there. That are legitimate, that people have legitimate grievances, I think. So the other thing, and when I was going to go to, this idea you talked about, like how the acceptance, and about how it's kind of like one of the analogies that came to my mind in watching youth groups and going to summer camp. You would see someone, youth group at, there's a lot of emotions, there's a lot of energy, there's a lot of passion, there's a lot of things that happen. And I was working with, the youth committee for several years at a large church. And so, we always anticipated every summer that there would be multiple baptisms that would occur at youth camp. It was something that happened, because like the first one, and then it's like a domino effect. It's like, the first one, and everybody's like, oh, wow, look at all the attention and positive energy and yada, yada, yada that person got. And so you see the second and the third and the fourth and the fifth and the sixth, and just it became like almost it was like a pandemic of, kids that were wanting to get baptized.
Social contagion.
Exactly. It really, really was. And, to the point to where some parents actually forbid their kids from being baptized at summer camp, because I think there's some that would say, that there's question whether the commitment and that it was well thought through, or if it was just more of, the social pressure of and the acceptance of saying, wow, that was awesome, I want that,
Right.
Kind of thing. And the other example I want to go to too, that comes from Scripture, is actually in Acts. And you look at what was happening in the early church, and Barnabas, son of encouragement, had given, sold a piece of property, brought the proceeds of that and laid it at the apostles' feet, and said, "This is, as his contribution," and saying, "I want to contribute." And he got a lot of praise, a lot of attention, a lot of for that gift. And there was a couple named Ananias and Sapphira that was over here watching that and saying, "Wow, that." I want that. Only problem with them is they were a little bit greedy, and they kind of lied and said, I'm doing the same thing, but they kept some of the money back, but they tried to make everybody believe that they were doing the same thing that Barnabas was doing, only they didn't give all of it, but they were kind of lying and saying that they did, because they wanted that attention. And I think that's the thing that I think we need to be careful, is even for a positive thing, giving Barnabas attention was a good thing. I mean, maybe. I mean, Jesus talked about how when you're giving, don't let your right hand know what your left hand doing. It's better to do things in secret. Honestly, I think that's true. But I think we need to be careful in praising one thing or in emphasizing one thing. It can lead to, praising a baptism at summer camp. It's a great thing. A baptism is a great thing. When it's real, when it's legitimate, it's a wonderful thing. But we have to be careful, because it becomes something where marriage is a wonderful thing, okay? But when we overemphasize it, then it becomes, everybody's like, well, I have to have that too, or I must have that, or I need that, I want that attention. I want to be part of that class. I want to be in that group. I want to be cool. And so that's kind of the thing. So I'll tell a story that's kind of personal to me. So very similar to what Geraldine experienced. For me, growing up, I was probably had some of the similar things happening with people. I mean, mine came a lot from my family, from my grandparents, from my parents. constantly talking about girls, constantly talking about, do you have a girlfriend? My grandmother, on my mother's side, we would drive for 3 hours. It was like I think it's about a 3 hour drive to their place. And we would drive in 3 hours, and we get out. She hugs me, and then she says, "Son, when you getting married?" And I'm like 17, 18. And that's the first thing she says to me. And it was not one time, it was every time that she said that to me. And the emphasis, was there. And, the same similar thing you said with elders and ministers and people focusing on that it's always like, when's this going to happen? And I mean, the implication there is, well, there's something wrong with you because you're not married. When she says, "Son, when you getting married?" It's like, well, there's something wrong with you. You don't have a girlfriend, and you're not married, so there's something really wrong with you. And that was a very clear message that came through. And I can remember I didn't have a lot of didn't do much, if any, dating in high school. And I think it was along my senior year, there was a girl that had interest in me that I, quite frankly, never did find attractive at all. I was never attracted to her. In fact, I was, I'll just leave it at that. I was never attracted to her. But she was very attracted to me, and that's a common thing that happens, on both sides, where you have, it seems like the ones that you're attracted to are not attracted to you, and vice versa. But the thing is that there was so much pressure put on me by Christian friends, that peers, people my age, multiple boys and girls, frankly, more. Actually, a lot of it came more from girls, and from elders and parents. And actually, in this particular case, this girl her grandmother was really good friends with my grandmother, and boy, they had figured everything out, and they had it all worked out. And at some point, as a young man, it's very, very hard. Plus, when you have people saying, well, when you get married, and you're thinking, well, I don't know if I'm ever going to get married. I don't know if this may be the best I can. That movie was As Good as It Gets. I think there's a lot of people, and this is where I think my story is not uncommon. I think that there's a lot of people that say, well, maybe this is the best I can do. I'm not really attracted to her, not really into her, but this is probably the best I'm going to get. Maybe I just need to go for it. Long story short, we ended up, giving in, and I ended up being engaged to her at some point. And, it kind of went, so you're like, how do you go to the point to where you're not really attracted to this person to being engaged to them? And I think the answer is because you feel like you have to. And because there's so many people putting pressure on you, and it's not really, you're not really acting for yourself. You're acting on what other people want you to do and expect you to do. And that's, I think, the crux of what we're talking about here with the church, putting emphasis on marriage and trying to get people to get married. I had no business ever being engaged to this girl. I probably should have never even gone out with her, frankly, because you probably shouldn't go out with anyone that you're not really attracted to. But it wasn't until I had in college some experiences where we had some folks, and one young lady actually said to me one time that we need to meet this girl and find out if she's good enough for you. And I was like, that just completely blew me away, because I'm like, wait a minute, good enough for me? I mean, it's always like, well, this is the best I can do because, I must be just some kind of a loser, right? And yet this young lady, and she was a very attractive and older, young lady. And so it was like, to have someone like her say that to me, it meant the world, because it's like, wait a minute, I do deserve something good. I mean, so it's kind of like that gave me the courage at that point to say, you know what, I'm not going to do what everybody else says I should do. I'm going to do what is best for me, because I am worth it. I am someone that is worthy of, having what I want and need, and not just giving in to what everybody thinks I should have. And, and at that point, I guess, I don't want to get into the details, but we had broken up at some point, and one of the elders even pulled me aside one time and said, trying to put a guilt trip on me, saying, you need to get back to her because if you don't marry her, then she's going to probably be lost, and it's going to be your fault, essentially, And I'm like, good grief. I'm like, you know what? Her soul is hers, and what happens to her and her soul is not. I'm not responsible for everybody's soul. I mean, in all honesty, if I read Scripture, the person that's responsible for her soul is the elder, not me. I mean, because Scripture kind of teaches that, the elders are going to give charge for the people under. So it's really more his responsibility than she is mine, but he was putting that on me, and yeah, that was just not okay. But yeah, that's kind of my story. So I think as we're going around stories, I think Caleb had a story that he was going to share.
You didn't finish that.
Did I not?
You did not marry her.
Oh, well, I think that's obvious that I didn't marry her. And frankly, I'm quite glad that I didn't, because in my case, instead, and this is the thing I think a lot of folks don't do, is you don't wait, and you have to wait, and you have to have standards. I mean, I see young girls giving themselves away, far too easily, and losing their virginity just because they feel like they have to, or young people just settling, saying, well, this is the best I can do, and and the thing is that I think a lot of it is that you need to understand you're a temple of the Holy Spirit. You're a child of God. You are someone special that means something to people, and you have to respect yourself enough to where you say, you know what? I demand more. I need more. I want someone who is going to be a good fit for me, and not just settling for what I can get. And that's probably not a popular message in the church or in society, because you have to be married. You have to have, and I think, frankly, if I had been lived my life as a single man for the rest of my life and never met Geraldine, then it would have been better for me, for sure, than having married this girl. I'm almost certain I would have ended up divorced if had I done so. I mean, I've seen similar cases where friends who were married to people they were not attracted to and did not end well. Never did. No. I've seen a couple of cases where that happened. Friends of mine that married a girl that they were not attracted to, and they both ended up in divorce in all cases. So, that's, never marry someone that you're not attracted to. Probably never even date someone you're not attracted to. If you're not attracted to them, you shouldn't even go out with them, frankly. That's my take. But yeah, no, I was rewarded, and I got what I wanted, and I'm 31 years of very happily being married now, and yeah, it's been great. So yeah, I think we're going to go to Caleb's story next.
How do you follow up that? Well, to start off, I actually had great parents growing up, so I didn't have the pressure from either of y'all, and I am forever grateful for that. So first off, thank y'all for not having that pressure on me. That was always such a huge blessing. But that didn't stop everybody else, which is where the story starts. So the thing is I'm not going to say where, but I went to a Christian college. That's where I got my degree in video production, and now I'm doing filmmaking and doing professional sports. I got my degree at a Christian college. But anyways, so there were several times, like, they would have this thing on Valentine's Day where they would have like these big things at chapel, and there were two chapels. There was one that was like on the 13th, and then one that was on the 14th, Valentine's Day. On the 13th one, they did a whole talk about singles and how don't waste your singleness, and don't, and they say, hey, the Apostle Paul was single, Jesus was single, and it was actually not a terrible talk. I'll give credit where credit's due. It was not a terrible talk. Don't waste your singleness, go out and do things for the kingdom. And I mean, it was like, okay, this guy's actually not bad. Fast forward to the 14th, I hear one of the worst chapels ever from the same person. It's like, yeah, all that stuff I said about being single, yeah, almost like throw. And he started just going on and on about how you need to get married at a Christian college. Like, you need to get married now or it ain't gonna happen, essentially. And he was pulling out all these statistics and just going on and on and on, just being like, see, like, people who live in, you know, like the Nashville or the Dallas or, you know, in the southern states, like, you might have a chance if you become part of a young adult group there, maybe you'll find somebody, but the chances are just so low, and it's just not gonna happen, and you're just not gonna find your spouse unless it's at a Christian college. And he just went on and on and on. And it's just like, the whole time I'm listening to this, I'm like, okay, you're just pulling out all these statistics and saying it's not going to happen. And I'm like, you didn't even once mention that, you know, well, what about God and his plan for the individual? Like, what about his plan? Are you, like, you're not factoring God's plan into any of this? And it's just like the whole time I'm just like, screw you, you're not factoring God's plan into this. Now, full disclosure, I'm not saying that if you went to a Christian college and got married that you are, you know, oh, I don't like that couple because they met at a Christian. No, I'm not like that at all. In fact, there's a couple that or two friends of mine that did get married, and they were actually in some of my short films. And I will talk about those in just a moment because they actually fit into the story. But they met at a Christian college, they got married, and it was really cool. But the way it all happened, it just, you know, it was clearly part of God's plan. And that's my point. Like, if it is to meet at a Christian college, great, but there's some that meet outside of a Christian college, or there's some people that just meet at the right time. And you know, the thing is, like, you know, Mom, I think you mentioned the Dallas Mavericks coach, Rick Carlisle. He met his wife way late, but they're still together. You know, like, but he waited. He didn't just, oh, I'm just going to get married now. No, you waited for that right person, and then, you know, you stay together. And that's what you need to be doing. You just need to wait for that right person. And that's something that, you know, I'm still waiting as of now. But going back to the stuff of the Christian college, like, yeah, that was one talk that really always irked me. But there were several times when I went there that was beyond infuriating. Like, all the churches in that area that were around the Christian college, quite literally none of them had a young adults group. They just had young adult classes, and they were just on Sunday mornings, and that was it. They didn't have any young adult groups because, oh, well, right by the Christian college. So they already have enough fun things to do there. And it's just like, well, shouldn't it be important to get some of these kids to be involved in your church and doing stuff with your church? I think that would be a huge missed opportunity for all those churches. I'm like, plan mission trips, plan, you know, service opportunities, plan all kinds of stuff. I'm not even just talking about social events. I'm talking about, you know, community events that you could plan with your church with all these young adults that are right there and just wanting to serve. But they just don't do anything for that because they just assume, oh, well, the Christian college, that's gonna take care of that, you know, for us. We don't have to try. We don't have to do anything other than maybe a standard Sunday morning class. And that's just really, that was always so infuriating to me because, you know, one of the ways that you could separate certain people, at least when I was there, was who was actually showing up to church, because not everybody that went to a Christian college went to church. I know, crazy, but it's true. And, you know, I wanted to, you know, connect with people that were actually closer to the kingdom and actually were for the kingdom. And finding those people, even at a Christian college, was just almost, it felt impossible. It's not impossible, but that's how it felt. I'll just emphasizing that. But yeah, and it just always annoyed me how they had, you know, just all these classes, you know, on Sunday morning, but they would never do anything beyond that. They just assumed that the Christian college experience would take care of everything. And going off of what, you know, Dad said about, you know, glorifying marriage, like, they would go to the absurd point when people got engaged. Like, they freaking would spray confetti on campus. And I'm not even saying that as a joke. It's legit. Like, that's what they would do. They would have what's called ring ceremonies, where they'd have everybody surrounding them and having candles and, you know, spraying more confetti and screaming and going, oh my gosh, y'all are married. Oh, they're going to make it. They're going to be together forever. And yeah. And again, let me just be honest. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have an engagement party. I'm not saying you shouldn't celebrate when something like that happens. Much like Dad said about baptism, it's a good thing. But, you know, if it's for the wrong reasons, if it's to get attention, if it's to, you know, boost my status, then no, I'm not going to celebrate. No, because no. And, you know, the ring ceremonies just got so repetitive. And I would try to have, it would be really hard to have a good attitude, because I know that some of those couples are legit, but not all of them were. In fact, the majority of them probably weren't. But there were, as I said, there were some that were good, but it would just, every time I'd see it, it would just make me annoyed. But going off to some more personal stuff with me, there would be several times where I would feel like I was denied things solely because I was single. Like living off campus, for example, was an absolute, you know, just getting to that point was a total disaster. And like, it felt like, you know, it wasn't until the dean of the college, who is an incredible man, fantastic man, and he really helped me out a lot. So the dean of the college was fantastic. But just to get me an apartment off campus was a freaking chore. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that, oh, well, we only rent those out to married couples. And I swear, I remember it like it was yesterday, going up to the, you know, people at the college and asking, hey, can I live off campus? I have enough money. I can totally pull it off. And they're like, yeah, well, are you married? That was like the first thing they asked. They didn't care about anything. Oh, are you married? Like, oh, are you engaged? Like that's all they cared about. And it's like, it wasn't until the dean of the college, you know, stuck up for me and actually said, hey, he needs to, because, you know, because I had celiac and I wanted to cook my own food, and you can't really cook in a dorm. And that was one of the main selling points for me living off campus, was that. You know, that's a whole other can of worms, but that's all they really cared about. And it always just irked me. And I'm blessed that I was able to still do it, but it was a freaking, you know, war to do it. And it was all because, oh, well, you're not married, so we don't know if we want to rent this out to you, because they act like I'm just going to, you know, be a sicko and I'm going to have people over and I'm going to sleep around and do all this. Or at least that's how they treat certain single people, especially at the Christian college. They just assume that if you're not married, then you're falling away and they're going to be concerned about your salvation. And that's how I constantly felt like, oh, well, he's single and he's only single because he's about the party life and doing all the drunk and all that crap. And I'm like, no, I'm just single. You know, but they just immediately throw you into that category. You know, I'm not going to pretend like there aren't single people out there that are just, you know, trying to get that high and trying to sleep around.
You knew some of them, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. Absolutely.
That happened at a Christian college.
No.
You mentioned that people would do that, and you'd see people get hotel rooms and stuff.
Yeah. No.
At a Christian college.
No, and so...
I did too. I mean, I went to Christian college, and it was on Sunday morning. When I got up, I was worried, because I was in the dorm, and I was like, oh, you know, because I got up even earlier for church, because I was worried that there wasn't going to be enough room in the bathroom for all these girls to get ready. And there was me and one other girl in the dorm that was up.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, okay. And I was like, where is everybody? And
Yeah. No, but going back to that, like, no, yeah, so I'm not going to pretend like that doesn't happen, and I guess I can understand where they're coming from, but just to throw out and assume, and again, it just goes off, but I guess the other thing they think of is, oh, if they're married, that automatically means that, oh, well, they're not going to be sleeping around because I already have somebody to sleep with, and I'm just like, oh, man, wow, okay. Like, but that's just where a lot of their minds went, and, you know, but that was just one example of, you know, being denied things, you know, and, you know, but there was also times where certain professors would just be blown away by me. And this is not negative on professors. It's actually a positive, because I had some of the best professors ever. I mean, I will just say some of my professors in my department were so freaking incredible. I mean, I loved my professors. They were awesome. One of them is actually proofreading my script for my feature film, and so I'm very thankful for that. He's awesome. He just won, but they would always look at me very interesting. They're like, there's something very different about Caleb, but I like that about Caleb. And the thing is, like, I was one of the weird kids that wasn't married, that wasn't dating anybody, that wasn't, trying to be obsessed about that. Now, full disclosure, at the time and to this day, I absolutely do want to be married. That is something I do want. But I'm not, going to, be obsessive or, just, go for the wrong person just because it's time, and that attitude, definitely plays through in some of the stuff that I do. And professors would just notice that about me, and they would just be like, dang, there's just something really whatever about Caleb. And like one professor even gave me an award that was named after a former student of his. And the award was basically for always saying yes to everything and always being there on time for work. And because I worked in Division II college sports, and so I basically helped run and direct a lot of the sporting events for the college, which was a ton of fun. I loved that job. But basically I just said yes to everything, and I constantly was working really hard, and they were just like, dang, how does Caleb find the time to do all this? I'm like, well, I'm not dating anyway. I'm not doing anything. And I'm like, why not, improve my craft? Why not? But the film that I did was called Not This Again. It was this short film I did at the Christian college. It was a film that I worked incredibly hard on. It was one of the first short films that I really, really tried to make really, really good. And basically the premise was this guy has had like a lifetime of romantic disappointment, constantly getting shut down by girls, throughout, his whole life. And then, one day this one girl comes into his place of work, which is he was a waiter at this place called Savor and Sip. She ends up actually, giving notice to him, actually taking interest in him. And he's not sure if he should even pursue this girl because, well, not this again, the title. And it was, something that I obviously was really passionate about, something that I, worked really, really hard on. A lot of elements of that short film are actually making it into my feature film that I'm currently working on right now. But that whole premise was, really great. And it was kind of funny that I had this cutesy little romantic comedy because almost everyone else in my class had like some creepy horror film. And so that's the other reason I was kind of like one of the oddballs. I mean, there was a couple of other comedies, but for the most part, it was just a handful of comedies, a bunch of horror, and then my film. But it played at the festival. We ended up renting out a theater in this small town, and it was a packed theater of like 300 plus people that came to watch all the films. And it was a surreal experience for me, just getting to see something I'd worked so freaking hard on, hours upon hours, even months to maybe even a year. Because I wrote a script over the summer and then took like a semester or two to make it. And then when it played at the festival and the jokes, came on, and everybody just started dying laughing at all the, jokes of the film. But one of the first big laughs of the film was I didn't mention this actually when we go back. There were scenes that took place in church. So the guy was a guy that went to church, and there were scenes that took place in church. And one of the first big gut-busting laughs that got everybody on board with the entire film was this guy was talking to his friends who were dating, and the first line out of their words out of their mouths were, "We're engaged, yay!" And the entire theater bursted out laughing. They were crying. They were rolling on the floor. And it was so much that you almost miss some of the other jokes in the movie. I mean, it was just so like, wow. I mean, I remember when I screened it in my class, it was a film producing class that we ended up showing it in, and people laughed at it there, but it was nothing like it was at the theater with people who hadn't seen it yet. Everybody just lost it. They went nuts over it. And, then there was a scene with an older woman, at church. And I had this older woman telling this younger man, like, why aren't you married yet? And he was just like, how old are you, son? He's like, oh, I'm, 21. She's like, oh, 21. It's like, oh, well, when I was 21, I wasn't just married, I was pregnant. And she's like, you need to get started. And then that was like another massive laugh from everybody, and they just died laughing. And it was just like, and, that was just the opening of the film. And, and then obviously the film goes out, and obviously he does, end up with the girl, and he does pursue her and everything. But it was really that first act that I'm most proud of that short film, that first 1.5 to 2 minutes that just really captured everybody. Because I showed him getting shut down by all these girls constantly, just them being like, yeah, no, I see us as friends. And, even this one girl freaking, rejects his marriage proposal even. And, then I have all of those combined with people at church saying, oh, well, why aren't you married yet? And then his friends are getting married, and, just visually conveying that there's all this pressure. And then just seeing everybody, some of the stuff was clearly played for comedy, but some of it obviously wasn't. But I'll never forget not just everyone's reaction at the film, but I had a line of people to talk to me, because when people found out, oh, this was directed by Caleb Smiley. And so some people who knew me, I had like a line of people coming to talk to me, and they were crying, and they were like how much this meant to them, and how real this really was, and how it just like, and everyone's like, dude, you get it. And it hit me so hard, because, Satan likes to plant lies in our heads, and definitely planted lies in my head at the time, thinking, because I felt isolated, I felt alone, I felt like, oh, well, it's easy for everyone else to get a date, or it's easier for everyone else to find someone. For me, it's next to impossible. But then there was a line of guys and girls, not just guys. There was plenty of girls too that just went on and on about how real it was. And my actors even said something when they read the script. One of them, my friend who played Eric in the film, when we were on set, he was reading this, and he was just like, oh. And I was like, what? And he's like, oh, nothing. I'm just reading this. Like, dang. He's just like, this is art. And I'm just like, I will never forget that. And that was one of the big selling points for me wanting to make movies, because I see, Jim Caviezel said it best in that special message of Sound of Freedom: the most powerful person in the world is a storyteller. Of course, he was quoting Steve Jobs, but still, it's a great quote, because it's true. And, that's why I've wanted to make my film, Where Are You?, which is also based on another short film that I did, because I did another short film after Not This Again. I did Where Are You?, which we're now making into a feature. And it had similar themes as well. I won't go into it too much, because I really want to talk more about Not This Again, because it had more of the church aspect, whereas Where Are You didn't. But I will say this about my feature film: if you're single, if you feel like you're alone, if you feel like you've been hurt by the church, if you feel like you've had people point fingers at you and, treat you weird just because you're not married, or act like you're a whiner because you're upset that you're not married, but people are just mad and saying, oh, you're just whining, and you just need to just pick somebody already and stop whining. And, because that's the other thing I've been accused of is, oh, well, you're just a whiner. And I'm like, I'm not a whiner. I'm like, I'm frustrated. Because I'm not just looking for anybody. I'm looking for a godly woman who puts God before me. And that's really hard to come by. I hate saying that, but it's really hard to come by. I mean, to find an attractive girl, easy. Just look outside. There's plenty of attractive girls. But an attractive girl who puts God before me, oof, that's hard to find. Very hard to find. And, but being called a whiner, like, because they just act like, oh, well, because that was one of the, issues some people had with the film, because we had a screening, as I said, in class that I had, where, people would give comments, and one of the kids who gave comments, and granted, he was married, or I think he was at least engaged or about to be engaged at the time, but I think he ended up marrying that girl. But anyways, he went on about how that first act was, he said, it just doesn't really add anything to the film. And he said, like, it just doesn't add anything. And he said, it's just, the guy's just so whiny. And I'm like, first off, he doesn't say anything. He's getting his rear end handed to him the entire first act. Second of all, without that, he's just some weird guy that you just met that's scared to talk to a girl. But when you see that first, backstory, you get it. It's much like that Pixar film Up. Like, without that first 15, 20 minutes of his wife dying, he's just a grumpy old man that is around. That's like, who is this an obnoxious Boy Scout kid that I have to carry around with me? But when you see that first 15, 20 minutes and you see that backstory, you get why he's a grumpy old man. He's not just a grumpy old man because he's a grumpy old man. There's a reason for it, But I'm just using that as an example. But, it's interesting because he had a different perspective, because he's like, oh, well, I'm married. And it's just like, well, for me in my life, I mean, I've lost count how many times I've been shut down and brutally hurt by girls who I thought actually cared about me. And I really wanted to show that on screen, but not to get revenge on them for anything. I just wanted to show that this happens. It's real. But I also wanted to give people hope, which is the whole point of, what I want to do with my movies is I want to give people hope. And, my film is also not just going to tackle the guy's side. It's also tackling the girl's side of it, too. My mom is, as I said in the previous time, she's co-wrote it with me. And so I'm not just making this for single guys. I'm making this for singles, period. Guys and girls. And, people who have been single, who are single, I feel like it's going to relate to so many people, Christian or not. And, I really am excited for people to see it. I'm just so excited for people to see it.
All right. Well, that's the end of part 1 of our potentially 3-part series on singles in the church. Thank you guys so much for listening. We really appreciate it. If you wanted to support us further, if you could check out our YouTube page, Verity Entertainment, or our website, verityentertainment.org, or potentially if you could leave a review on Apple Podcasts or any of the other podcast sites, that would be amazingly helpful. I really hope you all enjoy it. Thanks so much for listening. See you next time.